My first mechanical keyboard was the Corsair Vengeance K60 with cherry reds. I wanted a better keyboard for gaming, and the 20 key rollover, textured WASD keys, and low actuation force of the cherry reds sold my younger self. I really loved the volume wheel on this board for some reason. It was just so satisfying to use. I used this keyboard for like 5 years. I got it in high school, then took it to university with me. Here's me working on one of my first design projects during a summer quarter. A couple of months before I graduated, I replaced the K60 with an AN Pro 1 with Gateron Browns. I wanted a smaller keyboard to have more room on my desk, and at the time the AN Pro was a decent off-the-shelf keyboard for the price. This was a time when I started to get into the mechanical keyboard scene. I was still a student, so I was broke. I mostly lurked around GeekHack. I remember seeing the original GMK Olivia group buy and really wanting it, but I couldn't justify spending $140 on keycaps. So I ended up buying a Taihao Hawaii set on mass drop for like 40 bucks. Here's a picture of me moving into my first studio apartment after graduation. As you can see, the first thing I unpacked was my computer setup. I eventually replaced a plastic table with a typical IKEA setup. After using a 60% layout for an extended period of time, I really started to miss having dedicated arrow keys. At this point, I was an intern at a tech company, so I was able to afford a nicer board. I ended up buying a KBD75 with Zelios V1 on Mech Market, and bought a set of eBBT 9009 to use on it while I waited for DSA Milkshake to come in. I guess you can say this was my first custom keyboard, even though I never actually built it. I eventually gave my AN Pro to a friend and had this KBD75 as my main board for a while. I currently have MT3 Serica on it with a Terrarium Artisan from Dwarf Factory. It's not my favorite keyboard, but it has some sentimental value, so I've been keeping it around. In August 2018, I discovered the Kira by Kono and ordered the plastic version, which got delivered in early 2019. I thought this was a really neat keyboard because you got most of the keys on the full size, but in the compact layout. I originally ordered it with box switches, but due to box switches cracking the stem of some keycaps at the time, I got them swapped out for KL coppers. When I got this board, I thought it would be my endgame, but we all know that endgame is a lie. Shortly after ordering the Kira, I converted my internship into a full-time job, so I was able to spend more money on this hobby. I started to go a little ham with buying keyboards and joining group buys, as you'll see. The next keyboard that got delivered in April 2019 was a UT47.2. It was a cheap way for me to try out a 40% layout, which I've learned that I don't really like. But now I use it to test out switches since it's hot swappable. June 2019, I built a Keyboard Iris with Gateron yellows. Similar to the UT47, it was a cheap way for me to try out a split keyboard. I still have this keyboard today with GMK dots, but I don't really use it anymore. The switches don't sound that great in this board and the case rattles, so I don't enjoy using it that much. I also moved from my old studio into my current 1-bedroom plus den around this time, so here's a shot of the Iris in my old den setup. September 2019, I received an EYE 6.5, my first 65%. This was my first high-end custom that I actually built. After a couple months with the Kira, I started to dislike how large it was and how all the keys were smushed together with no blockers. Since I mostly wanted arrow keys, I figured a 65% would work out, and it sure did. 65% is still my favorite layout today. It was built with Gateron Black inks and DSA Milkshake, but a few months ago I decided to desolder the Gateron inks because they were a bit too heavy for me, and I replaced them with mauves. I'll be saving the V1 inks for a future build. A month later in October, I got a polycarbonate Think 6.5. Polycarbonate boards were becoming more popular around this time, so I wanted to try it out, along with a hotspot PCB. The switches in this board are T1s with clear bottoms and cherry tops. I used the cherry tops to get a nicer sound on the upstroke. Right now, I have GMK Bento on it. October 2019, I got a Navy EXT 65. After working full-time as a product designer for a bit, I really miss having a numpad for reasons that you can find in my Southpaw video. When I discovered the Southpaw layout and found this board, I knew I had to have it. Since it was going to be the board I had in the office, I built it with MX Xylants, which are cherry silent stems and a Zeal housing. I had my EPBT 9009 keycap set mounted on it while I wait for GMK Metropolis, but these days I have Cat Milkshake on it. November 2019, I got a Rukia, which is a polycarbonate Alice layout with a large shiny brass weight. I bought this keyboard because I wanted to try out the Alice layout and ran into this group buy on GeekHack. It has a polycarbonate plate and is built with cherry blacks with 65-gram springs and GMK peaches and creams. The cherry blacks give this board more of a clacky sound versus a thocky sound from my other boards. December 2019, I bought a Gothic 70. I bought this board because it's an Alice-like layout with arrow keys, and I love my arrow keys. The case I ordered is full palm except for the frosted bottom layer. Since it's a sandwich mount board with a stacked case, it wasn't too expensive. In total, it was around $150 or so. I built it with Gateron Yellows and GMK Mizu. March 2020, I got the Orthochu. If you remember what I said about the UT47, you're probably wondering why I bought this even though I dislike 40%. Well, basically because Pokemon. I really just have it for decoration. I built it with Gateron Yellows because I thought the yellow stems would be fitting, and have SA Vileplume on it to continue with the Pokemon theme. I also have a Snorlax and Gengar Artisan from S-Crafts. That's all the keyboards I have on hand right now, but I quickly want to talk about my future boards. I'm currently waiting for a black SP111 that I hope will be delivered soon. I bought this board because I think it's super unique. Southpaw layout, split keyboard, compact full size, this thing is a beast. I'm going to build it with marshmallow switches, which are a progressive 68-gram linear switch. Not sure which keycap set I'm going to use. I may move my cat milkshake over to this board and put GMK Metropolis back on the EXT65. That's the only keyboard I'm waiting on at the moment, but I'm thinking about a TKL for my next purchase. To be honest, I'm not sure how much I'll like the TKL layout because I don't really use the cluster above the arrow keys, but there's something visually appealing about TKLs, especially with a 7U spacebar. I'm currently thinking about the Iron 180, and I would build it with V1 Gateron black inks that I desoldered from my E6.5, but with slow curved springs. And that's my Mekango keyboard journey so far. I do actually use all of the keyboards I own, well, besides the two 4% and the Iris. I have 2 desks at home, so I swap out the keyboards on them every 2 weeks or so. That's it for me today. I am planning on making more informative keyboard videos. My next video will be about springs, but it may or may not be my next video. I don't want to only create keyboard related videos on this channel. Please like the video if you found it interesting and subscribe to stay updated on my future content. Until next time.